Bro, I hate rugby league. I hate rugby league, but I love rugby league. The Bulldogs have won in Golden Point. King Critter has just scored. Critter has just kicked a field goal to win the game for the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. We were this close to leaving Las Vegas with 0 points, and now we are absolutely adulated. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. And that's the emotion of rugby league right there. When you're so close to losing, you come to appreciate the wins. And that is a massive 2 points that the Bulldogs ultimately run away with and will leave Vegas with and come home to Belmore with those 2 points. If you're happy that the Bulldogs have won the game, make sure to like the video. Oh my goodness, Stephen Crichton. He was the Bulldogs' best player comfortably. And I want to talk about the game and not to take away from the emotion of winning. Obviously, that is huge. It's brilliant to obviously win, and you should always celebrate the wins. No matter how bad you play, it's about the 2 points. At the end of the day, the record books will say the Bulldogs won and the Dragons lost. So you take it. But oh my goodness, I've got so much shit to get off my chest after that performance. Let's start with the positives. The Bulldogs won. Another positive, Stephen Crichton is a Bulldog until 2031. Thank goodness for that, because I don't know where we would have been this game if Stephen Crichton didn't play. That was utter shit. I'm not going to filter what I say. And in terms of, I'm going to try and keep it a little bit measured because I appreciate that it's round one. I appreciate that match fitness, match sharpness. You don't want to be hitting your peak performance in March. No one in history of rugby league has ever won a competition in March. So I fully acknowledge that. But what I will say is that was a dog shit performance. All that performance told me was the Bulldogs' halves conundrum is going to carry on all season long. I'm going to talk about here where the Bulldogs dead set lost that game. And if they were versing a better opposition, they would have lost that game. And again, I don't wish to be negative, but I'm going to call a spade a spade. I'm not someone who is looking for a job at the Bulldogs so I can be on Instagram and promote their products. I want to be honest. I want to be a voice for the fans that represents when we're good, but also be critical when it deserves to be critical, because that performance was not good enough. All right, so let's talk about it. Let's talk about the game. That match had no control. The Bulldogs were beaten in the forwards. The St. George Illawarra Dragons, for me, were the more resilient team of the two sides. The Bulldogs had majority of the ball. The Bulldogs had rub of the green. And let's not pretend that they didn't. The Bulldogs got a lot of favourable decisions go their way in this football match. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that everything was fair and unequal. The Bulldogs got the rub of the green. I think Stephen Crichton was very lucky to stay on the field in the first half after the high tackle on the winger there. But again, we take it. So let's talk about a few things. I'll start with the halves. Sorry, I'm going to start with the centers and the wingers. I think that something needs to be said here. On one side, I kind of admire that Cameron Ciraldo tries things. I don't want to ever discourage a coach from being experimental and planning for a rainy day. So I will say that. In saying that, round one is probably not the game where you want to be experimenting with combinations, with changing sides of players. And I just think that there were so many things that had already changed in terms of the Bulldogs attack, which I'll get to in a moment. But I just thought changing Crichton and Kiraz, which was an absolutely lethal right-hand side attack last season, why are you moving him over to the left? I don't get it. And then conversely, why move Cherry, who is a left-handed ball carrier, to the right-hand side? I can't make sense of that one. That blew my mind. I don't get it. Stephen Crichton was terrific today. He scored a terrific try. He left Valentine Holmes for dead. So Stephen Crichton can play both sides. So this definitely is not a why is Stephen Crichton playing on the left when he's not capable. He can play wherever he wants because he's the best center in the world. But I just think that after last season, where Cherry and Montoya thrived on the left-hand side, and more specifically, Stephen Crichton, who is the best center in the world as a right center, and Jacob Kiraz, who to me is ready for state of origin football. I just don't understand why we move them over to the left. So that's a question mark for me. And I just, now that the game's unfolded, that question mark is still remaining because I didn't see any benefit to the Bulldogs for that change. So I'd like to understand why Serraldo wanted to do that. But ultimately, the switch up didn't necessarily contribute to why the Bulldogs won or lost. However, I could potentially say to that the Bulldogs conceded points on the left-hand edge where Crichton and Kiraz were, perhaps because they're not used to playing on that side. So there you go. There's a question mark that we're not going to get the answers to. Maybe that's something. If I was in that presser, that's something I'd want to ask Cameron Serraldo. The other thing I want to talk about here is Lachlan Galvin. So he was far from perfect, but I'm encouraged by what he did in this performance. So what I mean by that is he was really busy. He was looking to get his hands on the ball a lot. He was playing both sides of the ruck, which I think is a really good thing for the Bulldogs in the grand scheme of things, and it's a good thing for Lachlan Galvin. He looked a lot more comfortable in the blue and white this time round compared to what we saw in 2025. However, there is way too much ball handling in the middle of the park. Lachlan Galvin was essentially playing 5'8" because Jamin Salmon was doing his best impression of trying to be halfback or doing a 2012 impression of James Graham. Jamin Salmon getting the ball at first receiver far too much, giving the ball to Lachlan Galvin as a second receiver, which I felt crowded out the edges, and they didn't get the breathing space to get into one-on-one positions. I think the Bulldogs need to tweak that. If you want a dominant half in Lachlan Galvin, if you want Galvin to play both sides of the ruck and you want Lachlan Galvin to be on the ball as much as possible, I'm all for it. If you want a half that's going to be dominant, though, then he needs to be first receiver. He can't be second receiver. So that's a criticism of the Bulldogs attack, and they need to evolve that and tweak it over the coming weeks because we can't see that level of performance, as I'd say, against a better side. I think the Bulldogs would have lost that game if they were versing any top 8 caliber team today. So that's something that they'll need to work on. The other thing I want to talk about here is Lachlan Galvin. Let me give him some credit because I like some things that he did with the ball. So I'm going to be a bit positive here. The way that he committed Leilua for Jacob Preston's first try was terrific. I normally would be critical of halves running sideways, but what Galvin did is he went really direct to the line, then shifted. And what that did is it had Leilua's shoulders turn inward, and then that opens up the hole for Jacob Preston to run into between Flanagan and Moses Sully. So well worked try there, and Lachlan Galvin deserves a lot of credit. I think he went to Jacob Preston a little bit too much, but again, he's 20 years of age. I don't want to be too critical of Lachlan Galvin in that regard. Jacob Preston, for me, again, really, really strong performance. He's such a good back rower. He's playing State of Origin this year, Jacob Preston. He's so good. He's just such a good player. And I hate to think what level of performance we'd get out of him if we actually got him some quality ball. And then I come back to the left-hand side, and then I'm going to talk about the halves in just a moment as well. The left-hand side got no quality ball. Crichton scored the try off a scrum, but if it wasn't for a scrum, then Stephen Crichton was never getting in a one-on-one position in this game. And again, because the Bulldogs' attack just was not set up in a way to give their quality centers quality ball. So they really need to do some work there. I thought Matt Purden was anonymous. And I think that comes back to there's too much ball handling in the center of the park, whether it's Kurt Mann, whether it's particularly Jamin Salmon. He was the one I really noticed. But there's just too much ball handling in the center of the park. Again, I emphasize this point. If Galvin's going to be the dominant half that plays both sides of the ruck, fine. But then he needs to be first receiver because you can't have Jamin Salmon crowding out the middle because it gives the defense too much time to press up on the edges. We have to give the Dragons some credit here. There's two sides on a game of football. Dragons, you know what? Dogs didn't throw a lot of question marks at them, but the Dragons defended well. So I'm going to give them a lot of credit. The biggest impact I want to give, you know what? I'm going to give a round of applause to Kyle Flanagan. He had a really big impact in the game, and by that I mean when the scuffle was happening with Montoya. That was the first time I saw Kyle Flanagan in that NRL match. So congratulations to Kyle for getting his 5 minutes of fame in that game. And well done on getting on screen in Vegas, Kyle. Make sure you frame that up and hang it on the wall. Because, yeah, that was the only time I saw you play all game. Can I just mock the Dragons winger, Christian Tupalupu, doing his best Hulk Hogan impression for throwing a winger over the sideline? Mate, are you a melon? Like, seriously, does this bloke have brain cells? I can't believe he's doing all these ones while they're losing the game because he threw Montoya over the sideline. Yeah, congratulations, mate. Enjoy the 0 points going home. Absolute melon. On one side, look, I have to admit, if I was a Dragons fan, I'd probably admire it, right? But I'm not. You want to celebrate like that when you're losing, well, then you open yourself up to criticism. So, yeah, Christian Tupalupu, you're a little bit loopy. I recommend not celebrating, mate, unless your team's winning the game. There's that one. So, yeah, you might want to stop being Hulk Hogan and just focus on your team trying to win the 2 points, eh? Something to think about for next time. All right, so this is where the criticism comes ultimately of the Bulldogs' performance. It fell down in the spine. Not enough creativity out of dummy half. Not enough forward momentum, granted, so I'll acknowledge that. But I'm going to highlight a few key moments out of Matt Burton, and Lachlan Galvin, particularly in that second half, which were really frustrating. The amount of times that the Bulldogs lost the ball on the last tackle, or handed over the ball, rather, on the last tackle with ball in hand was reckless. And then we come to the very end of the game. So we're 3 minutes out from full time, and the Bulldogs... So I'm going to give Matt Burton a little bit of credit. He puts the grubber through, he sees the space in behind, he makes a line break, good play. Gives the ball over to Lachlan Galvin, Galvin gets tackled, no problem. It's the last tackle, Matt Burton's on the left-hand side, the Dragons are stripped short on the left-hand side. So what do? We pass to the right-hand side. We give it to Bronson Cherry to get tackled on the last tackle with less than 5 minutes to go. What's the go there? Matt Burton should be yelling for the ball. If you don't see the try going on, no worries, mate. Go for the repeat set. Put the grubber into the in-goal, build the pressure. So I thought that was really poor game management from both Lachlan Galvin and Matt Burton in that case. Then we get to the latter point. So the next set we had. So at this point, there's about 3 minutes left in the game. The Bulldogs did not set up for a field goal at any point in that set. It was the set that ended with Stephen Crichton throwing it forward to Kiraz. I'm not convinced the ball went forward, but let's say it did. All right, no problem. We can't go back in time. Why is the ball approaching the sideline on the last tackle when there's 3 minutes left on the clock? The question marks around the halves are not petty. This is why there are question marks over Lachlan Galvin and Matt Burton. And this is why when I did the 10 players under the most pressure, that's why those two players got into the top 5, because their game management against a poor Dragon side was abysmal. It was non-existent. So they need to improve there. I'm not going to call for anyone's head. I'm not going to say anyone's a bad player or anything like that. Not at all. And both of them are good players, but they need to manage the game better. They really need to do better in those moments. But yeah, Stephen Crichton, mate, seriously, I think he signed, I don't know how much his new deal is worth. I don't know if it's 800,000, 1 million, 2 million, 2 million and a paper bag, 2 million and a free manouche from Mount Lewis Pizzeria every Sunday. But whatever it is, Stephen Crichton, mate, you deserve every dollar, every manouche, whatever it is you want. King of Belmore. The bloke is magic. Yeah, Stephen Crichton, absolutely terrific. Sam Hughes had a bit of a rough game, didn't he? Giving away penalties and so forth in the start there. But yeah, anyway, Dogs didn't concede a lot of points. I won't be too hard on them in that respect, but we go again. Week off, the guys are going to travel back, I imagine, rest up. Thankfully, look, we got the 2 points. No major injury concerns. Happy days. As far as I'm concerned, that's a victory. We're not going to hit peak performance in round 1, but this team have played together for more than 2 years now. So we need to see an evolution of the attack. And I will hope that by the time we get to round 3, which I believe is against the Cowboys, that we see a better performance in the attack. I don't want to see Jamin Salmon handling the ball. The Bulldogs can't play like it's 2012 anymore. So yes, a few things to work on, But overall, a positive performance. And hopefully we see Stephen Crichton and Bronson Xerri switch back, and we see Jacob Kiraz and Marcelo Montoya switch back. I really didn't like that swap over. So yeah, anyway, hopefully that will be sorted. I'll do a video reacting to the Knights-Cowboys game. Well done to the Newcastle Knights, as predicted, that they would win. So well done to them. But tomorrow we got 7 things we learned from round 1. So look out for that video. And if you're new, make sure that you hit that subscribe button. Lots of content coming your way, and I've got some exciting plans for the Bulldogs' first home game. So I won't reveal too much, but that's all to come in time. So if you are new, make sure that you subscribe, like the video, all that good stuff. You all have an awesome weekend. The Bulldogs got 2 points. King Critter, give him the crown. I hope you all have a good weekend. We'll see you soon. Get out of here.